Steph Wilberding. Welcome to Thyroid Strong podcast. Super excited to have you just because we have been in like the same spheres, the microcosms, but have never crossed paths until online.
I
So
know.
let's chat about your time in New York City. I was there
Okay.
for 14 years. You were there for
16
whew,
and then 9 months.
and then COVID locked it all down.
Yeah. No, actually, I was there for 16, went to LA for 4, and then went back to New York because I thought it was time to move home, and got there last January and stayed for 9 months and was like, I got to get out of here.
Interesting. So you were first a student and then a coach at Mark Fisher Fitness in New York
Yes.
City, which has a very, like, if people don't know, has a very particular vibe and clientele, right? So like
Mhm.
the people who come to classes are called ninjas. Everything is very neon and there's lots of unicorns.
Yeah. It
Very
was,
amazing space.
it's an amazing place and it still is. And I think I think it's in its 10th year now, maybe 11th. And I was there as a ninja, as a client, as a ninja. After having worked with Mark Fisher before, we met doing a show together, a theater show. And then I did one of his program where he was just renting space in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, and then that took off so quickly that he then needed to open an actual space. And then I went there and I was a client and a ninja. And then one day after class, he pulled me aside and was like, "What are your thoughts about working here?" And I was like, "Oh, you mean like on the business team or on the front desk?" Or like I just did not assume coach. Um, and he was like, "No, no, no. I mean, as one of our trainers, like I think you have a very I think your journey is very relatable, and you move like an athlete you always have. So like I don't need to worry about you not being able to coach from that side of it. But I would take you under my wing and kind of teach you the way I want you to teach." And I was like, "Okay, can I think about it?" Because I was really taken, aback. And I think I texted him 2 hours later, and I was like, "I'm in."
Love it.
Yeah.
So good. So how did your journey progress? Because you were diagnosed with Hashimoto's last year.
Actually, not even this past September,
Oh, this
so
past
4 months
September.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how
Um,
did it progress from like your trainer, your training
yeah.
clients, COVID craziness to getting diagnosed?
So I spent 2018, I moved to LA and opened a gym. I had my own kettlebell group fitness studio. And I actually think I probably developed this around 2020, if I'm really looking back to the way I was feeling. I also went into ovulatory dysfunction with all of this, and that happened sooner. And I obviously noticed that because I stopped getting my cycle. But it was a lot. It was a lot of going back and forth with physical therapists to diagnose this low back pain I couldn't get rid of. There was a lot of hip and pelvis stuff I was trying to figure out. And then I moved back to New York a year ago, so 2022. And I was setting up my medical care in the city. And I went to a gynecologist to set up care. And she did she goes, "We're just gonna do some basic blood work. You haven't had your period in a couple years. So let's just rule things out, probably just early menopause, whatever, or in menopause." And so that came back and she's like, "Your thyroid we need to get you to an endocrinologist." She started me on thyroid medication right away until I could get into the endocrinologist. 3 months later, I got into one, more blood work, went to see him, and he was like, "You have Hashimoto's."
Do you know what
And
your labs were at the time when your gynecologist kind of was like, "We're putting you on meds, we're sending you an endo"?
yes, I mean, I could not repeat to what they say. And it was all, honestly, the gynecologist was like, "We're going to do blood work to just make sure we're not missing anything, but you are most likely in menopause." And that was actually the hardest thing for me.
Mm.
Um, I knew I probably was never going to get pregnant because of the age I'm at and life circumstances. But that was the harder thing for me at the time, was to really sit with that expiration date on my body. I mean, that subway home was pretty like my baseball hat was really low on that subway ride home. But then fast forward to the endocrinologist and him asking me questions like, have you been in like pain you can't really explain? I was like, yes. Have you been suffering from anxiety and depression? Yes. Like all these questions I had yeses to. And then when he told me I had Hashimoto's, it was like this light bulb, and I barely had an emotional reaction to it. I was just thankful that it was all being explained.
Yeah. Almost like it's not in my head, or
Right.
there's finally some logical explanation to it.
Yeah.
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 So what happened after you saw the endo? Like what kind of steps was he like, okay, we're going to walk this path?
Yeah.
Was it more, okay, here's meds, this is what you're going to be on, these are the symptoms you're going to have? Or was it a little more like, hey, let's talk about food and maybe some other
I mean, he
pieces?
was pretty like, mind you, this was all happening in September of 22. So just 4-ish months ago. And I was already planning my exit out of New York. So I was trying to get all these doctor's appointments in before I left. And I was planning my own one-woman show and doing all this stuff. So everything was happening very quickly. But he essentially said, zero gluten, right? You need to like get, and I was pretty much, I've been gluten-free for a few years. And then he's like, and then I'm going to say no to low dairy. You might just need to explore that on your own. And then he bumped up my thyroid medication just a little bit. And then put me on progesterone because of my ovulatory dysfunction, as he described it. And he said, I want you to take it for 14 days on and 14 days off for the first few months, because we're going to see if we can actually bring your cycle back. And then if that doesn't happen, we'll take it from there. And so that's what we did for a few months. And then just before the holidays, we did a telesession, and he, followed up, and my cycle never came back. So now he's like, you can just take progesterone every day now. And because I tell you, the progesterone really, like, my mood and my distraction levels just changed so much. My focus was so much better. And I would say within 2 weeks, my low back pain was gone almost 70 to 80%.
I mean, that's incredible because, I mean, progesterone is anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and, you know, coming from it from a chiropractic angle, right? Like you could have seen PT and chiropractors all day long, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't have helped. You would have keep coming in and been like, oh, like I still feel it. So yeah. How are your workouts at that time? I mean, I know
Non-existent.
non-existent.
I mean, not non-existent. If we backpedal a little bit to when I was still in LA, I was in so much pain all the time. I had a physical therapist that somebody else in the fitness industry recommended to me. It was during COVID. We did a lot of Zoom sessions. And I told him, I said, I'm really like mentally struggling because I haven't worked out in a year and a half, really. I do a lot of walking and hiking. And he was like, well, you could cycle. Like, that's not going to hurt your lower back, because we didn't know what was going on. So I got a Peloton. So I was on my Peloton all the time. But I wasn't weight training at all. So,
Did you
pretty
notice it?
soon, yeah.
Did you notice a difference in muscle tissue? Right, because you have a training background, right? So you
Yeah.
know what it's like to
Oh,
weight train, have muscle tissue versus maybe something that's quote unquote low impact, um, maybe a little more cardio focused. Did you notice a difference in your muscle tissue or in body
I'll
composition?
tell you when I noticed it, and maybe I'm fast forwarding too quickly in the interview, but I noticed it when I started working with you,
Oh,
because I was so mentally, like, the word coming to me is like mentally, like, stuck in pain, that I didn't even care how strong I was. I just wanted to get out of pain. And so I noticed it when I started training with you. I was like, oh yeah, we've lost a lot of our strength. It will come back. But I didn't really notice until I re-entered strength training.
it's very
Yeah.
humbling to step away for a little bit for whatever reason, right? For pain, for like autoimmune flare up. And sometimes I would just have these memories of when I have come back and I warm up with a 135 hex bar deadlift. you know, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so heavy. And I'm thinking back to like when I used to train consistently, and that was
Yeah.
like, oh, this is like my light warm up. And then, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
re-entering feeling like, wow, this is really effing heavy.
Yeah. One day after, and I know we're going to talk about the program, but one day after, I found myself scrolling on my phone to find these old videos from Mark Fisher days.
Yeah.
And I had done this program with my friend, Amanda Wheeler, who was at Mark Fisher with me.
Yeah.
And she had a strength program I did, and I had worked up to like a double 20 or 22, double 22 squat for like a set of 3 or something.
That's heavy.
And
That's
it's
heavy.
heavy. That's like 80, 90 pounds, right? And I watched the video and I was like, oh God. And I was holding a 12-kilogram single bell, thinking, oh my God.
Yeah. It's humbling. It's very humbling.
Yeah.
How did you like, how did we cross paths? How did you find Thyroid Strong?
This is why the internet is so great. Okay. So there are so many days where I'm like, I need to take my eyeballs off this damn screen. I'm going to get to be 90 years old, hopefully, and be like, I spent my whole life looking at the fucking screen. Sorry, I cursed.
Okay.
But as soon as I knew that I had a pathway forward out of pain, I started like researching everything. And I didn't know a lot about Hashimoto's. I knew a bit about it from some other clients. And so I literally think I Googled Hashimoto's and like your website was there. So great SEO. And I was scrolling and I was like, this woman's in New York. Interesting. And then I went to your Instagram. I'm like, no, she's not. And then I went back to the website. And as I was scrolling, there were like some pictures of a few people in the room doing something. And I noticed Matt Semrick. And Matt had come to Mark Fisher many times and done some in-service work with us, right? So I literally was like, well, if Matt works with her, she's legit. Let's move forward. And I reached out to you.
Amazing. I love Matt. I love that guy.
He's
so much.
great.
He's so great.
He commented on something I shared at some point, and I was like, it's because of you that I found her. But I knew, left to my own devices, I would probably, even though I'm a trainer, I knew my program design needed to be more specific for me at this point. And I really just wanted to get back to the gym safely and not overdo it. And that's why I just reached out and I said, I don't know if I need 12 weeks because I do know how to manage kettlebells and handle them. And you said, nope, you need 6. And it was great. And I did every single workout.
I have to say, you are very much the personality type. Like you give you a plan, you execute, which is amazing. That's like the dream person, right? Because a lot of people are like, well, I haven't started because my kettlebells are downstairs and I work out upstairs and you know, like just whatever comes up.
That's so funny you said that because my friend I'm living with here right now in Dallas, I'm just in Dallas for like a blip of time. We were chatting the other day and he said to me, he's like, I forget what word he used, but like, you're an executor.
You're an executor. 100%.
And I was like, I am. Maybe that's why it's so hard to run my own business.
The checklist is too long. I'm the same way. I'm like, just give me a plan. I just want to feel better. Just give it to me and I'll do it. And yeah. How did it feel to like, so it was interesting on my end because I was like, oh, here's a trainer who knows kettlebells, knows the form, like every single form cue I say, she's kind of be like, oh yeah, I know that. Yet you found value in the program.
Completely. I think a coach always needs a coach to some extent, not maybe every day and every month, right? We have seasons where we need it.
Yeah.
I have a former client of mine who trained with me, who's now a coach, and I still coach her. And she's like, I need the time, right? But anyway, it felt a couple things. It felt really nice to have someone lead me. And there was, attention to detail and cues that I either hadn't heard before, like your variation on things, or it had been a while. And I was like, that's a good reminder. Specifically the attention to some breathing stuff I found really, really helpful. Namely in, some pressing stuff that we did on our back and not having an arch in my lower back, right? Like I intellectually understand why we cue it for most people, but for me, it just never feels good. And yeah, a lot of that breathing stuff has been really game changing for me in my continued training. It also felt, what felt really great is because I was following a program and someone was telling me what to do and I was just going to do it, is that if I got to the gym at 1:00, did the warm up, did the workout, and it was 1:35, I was like, done. I didn't have that, like, I should stay and do more. I'm not here long enough. Like, I just felt really taken care of because I knew it was so thought out.
Yeah. Almost like that permission to kind of honor, like, okay, so I'm working out for my body where it is in this place and time, which is like in the beginning journey of having an autoimmune condition and with like, going into early menopause, your body feels different. It's so crazy to think, I'm like, no man's going to like really feel that like experience on like a under the skin kind of level.
Right. I mean, you think about it, and this isn't like any, male bashing, like any change that really happens is just a natural circumstance of age or maybe injury. I hope not. Right.
Yep.
But none of it is like built in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We have built-in changes that we cannot avoid.
Yeah. I mean, I bring it up because I think culturally, and again, it's not like man bashing, but it's culturally, it's sometimes there's such a strong messaging of, eat less, work out more, move more, like push through the fatigue, like kind of like giddy up, man up, like kind of push yourself to overcome. And you're like, no, dude, you don't get it. Like if I overdo it, I literally like can't finish my sentence for like 2 days.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Like
It was
kind of a
also,
different level.
yeah, it was also important for me because once I kind of got information that, let me rephrase that. Once my pain was explained a little bit more and I understood there was a path forward, in addition to training, I'm also a performer. And I was in so much pain that I was like, I don't know if I can do 8 shows a week. Like, if this is the kind of work I'm trying to get and I can't physically do it, I need to figure this out. Right. So training to be able to do my job if one comes my way was also really important to me.
Yeah. Cause that's what fills the soul, right?
Fills the soul. And like, oddly, as a trainer, I don't need to be in that kind of shape. Like, I can train somebody in pain.
Right.
Which seems odd, but I can. And I have for 2.5 years. And that was mentally tricky, right? To be like, let's swing this blah, blah, blah. And then in my head going, I can't do that right now.
Was there any imposter syndrome when you were like, were there any like feelings that came up like that?
Tons of that, and tons of like, back in the day when I first started in the fitness industry, I had a few interactions with other people in the industry that made me feel really judged. And it was all like, oh, you work at the gym, you work at Mark Fisher Fitness. Oh, and then a lot of like looking up and down, like I don't look like a trainer. And I struggled with that for a really long time. And then I did kind of look like a trainer, whatever that means. But, I was able to kind of transform my body the way I wanted it to feel strong. And then not being able to train for so long and not even the size of my body, but the weakness that I felt, it felt really shitty, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And that has felt good again. Like, just even, I do a lot of Zoom one-on-one coaching, and even to be able to like pick up the couple kettlebells I have here and get on the floor and get back up again. That was hard 6 months ago.
Yeah. I mean, huge transformation. So after Thyroid Strong, you kind of continued, right? Because I mean, an autoimmune condition is definitely a journey. You've continued this journey.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of in a cycle where I'm at the gym about 3 days a week. And then I'm doing a ton of power walking, and I love it. It's like it's like my go-to peace moment. I love it so much. And currently I'm not quite this week. I've had my hip has flared up a little bit from some other stuff. So I'm kind of taking it easy, but, that's kind of my thing. 2 to 3 days of strength training and 3-mile power walks a week. And I just feel great.
Which I think is important, right? Because I think sometimes the perception is we need to be in the gym 5 days a week, 6 days a week.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing to, well, it's hard. That's a hard, mindset to shift in ourselves, but also in your clients. And I have some people right now working with me online in this new program I have. And it's the new year, which is also tricky. So there's a lot of like, I want to do this program perfect. I want to do this program. And I was like, just remember that one of the tenets of this program is to create a long-term lifestyle and not work out 6 days a week.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. People want to pay for big transformation really fast.
Yeah. I mean, that's tricky, right? Because then let's say the transformation's weight loss. Let's just say hypothetical, like losing muscle tissue is part of that weight loss. And then like, how do you preserve muscle tissue? Try not to lose too much of it while still changing your body composition, losing fat, having that big transformation.
Yeah.
What were some of your favorite things about Thyroid Strong?
I love the weekly lives. I thought those were really helpful. For a few reasons. One, as a participant, it was really helpful to hear other people's questions. And just listen in to like what other people are doing to navigate around things, and then to listen to you coach them through that. As a coach, it was really fun to watch you coach people. I learned a lot. That was what was cool about it too, right? Like if somebody came on and they had some questions, you're like, great, grab your kettlebell, right? And we were like, here I am watching you coach somebody. And it was really fascinating. I love that about it. So, and I do think the access, right? Having that access and then seeing people and being able to take advantage of it was really great. That was one thing I loved. The other thing I loved is even though I was going to a gym to do this, because of where I'm living right now, I don't have a lot of weights with me. This gym had plenty of kettlebells, but still like I kind of use 3 every time,
Like you don't need a lot.
You don't need a lot. You
No,
don't need a lot. And I was able to just like kind of grab a few things, set up my own little corner of this gym and get my shit done and leave. And then I will say, the day we finally got to do swings, I was like, oh, and I waited. I actually waited. I followed the rules and I waited. So I guess the thing about the program that I should say to that note is the build. It's a really smart, well thought out build up to the baller moves, if you will, right? The things that make you feel like such a badass that are also wildly beneficial. Totally. But the buildup is you're so taken care of. You really take care of people in this program.
Yeah. I when I first programmed Thyroid Strong, which is like the 6-week, the person in mind was the woman with Hashimoto's who has worked out before, maybe touched a weight, but maybe injured themselves or burnt out and just kind of want to do it better and smarter. And a lot of people were coming to the program who only were walking 2,000 steps a day, maybe. And it was interesting to have to kind of like transform the program, like almost put a beginner piece. Does the actual program now, I guess could be beginner, intermediate, maybe. But yeah, it was interesting to just connect with women and hear them be like, yeah, this is great. I had to kind of go through it twice, once with a lighter weight, once with a heavier weight, and then create something to kind of tack on to the beginning to progress it slower. And I was nervous. The original program was programmed with a little bit more reps, right? Like some of it's like 3 reps, like 3 reps. but I really had to dial it back because in the beginning, Matt and I actually worked together of like, okay, what would this look like? Because we were treating women with Hashimoto's in
Right.
person. And for the online piece, I actually had to dial it back more.
Yeah.
Because people were coming in at kind of all different entry points. So.
Yeah. And I mean, I have to say, like, I thought about this a lot. Well, I was going through your program because I guess started at the intermediate part, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I thought a lot about it. And as a coach, training with kettlebells is really hard to do virtually.
Yes,
it's really hard. So anybody listening who is working with Emily right now and you have amazing technique, is because she's an excellent coach. It is really hard. It's hard to train people with kettlebells in person.
Yes.
So the attention to detail in your program, you know, to get people 6 weeks in holding a kettlebell properly on an offset squat or an overhead press is a feat in and of itself.
It really is.
Yeah. So
really
good job.
Thanks. So, what did you change other than like gluten-free, dairy-free? Did you change any other factors in how you're eating or your kind of like your food journey?
Yeah.
I do see your Instagram and I'm like, can she come over and cook?
I know. Well, I also happen to be living with a friend right now who's an amazing cook, and he's like willing to do gluten-free stuff with me. But, you know, because of some of the resources in Thyroid Strong, I was able to go like, okay, let's pay more attention to protein intake. I am somebody who eats a decent amount of protein anyway, but I was definitely like, I think I could bump it up a little bit more. So that's definitely changed and become more consistent now. With just what I like to call like a snapshot of the plate, right? Like looking and going like, do I have protein and is it enough, right? Like one egg isn't enough or whatever the thing is. So really paying attention to my protein levels, and just focusing that the plate has everything I know I need on it. And it doesn't need to look like something I would serve at a dinner party, right?
Yeah.
It just needs to be something to like get me through the day. I think that's a big hang up people have with food. They're like, can I just eat it this? I'm like, yeah, you can just eat a piece of chicken and a piece of toast with avocado on it if you want. And they can be separate things on one plate. It doesn't need to be. So just remembering and kind of dialing back, because I love to cook, dialing back on my breakfast and lunch most days to being very simple and what I like.
I love it.
Yeah.
Simplicity, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have salt for spices. That's about it.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, I went to this fitness conference in August. Oh my God, August. November, and in Austin. Austin in November came out as August. And because of my kind of reset on food with your program and just knowing what's going on with my body, a lot of ideas around my food coaching came from it, right? Of like, we need to make this simpler and easier. And so now I'm using some of these new ideas in my own coaching programs.
I love it. Tell me about your coaching program. Leading Lady Fitness.
Leading Lady Fitness is my brand, so to speak, which came to me working with Jill and Shantae, actually. For those of you listening that aren't theater people, when you are in a show, there is like a leading lady of the show or a male lead of the show. And I had heard an interview a long time ago by a very famous Broadway actor. And somebody said to him, what is your responsibility as the lead? And he said, my responsibility is to care for the energy of everybody involved.
Wow.
Whether it's on stage, off stage, the usher, the lighting, people, whatever. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I like that. So that's where Leading Lady Fitness came from.
I like that.
And also
it's a lot of weight on that.
It's a lot of weight, but also and I knew I wanted to like bring my training back to the Broadway community somehow. So I did a lot of Zoom training over the pandemic, as many people did. And there's only so many hours in the day and so many ways you can juggle time zones. And so I was trying to figure out a way to coach more people in a one-on-one capacity. And so I launched in the new year, Leading Lady Fitness Online. And essentially, all programs are delivered over the app True Coach, and people can do them at home. They can do them at the gym. It's very dumbbell focused so that people can have easy access to it right now. And So it's all online, and we just started, we're in week 2. I do still one-on-one train a handful, I have some clients that I do that. But it's been awesome. I have people in LA, New York, London, and I miss coaching a lot of people.
Like in a group setting.
In a group setting. And this is kind of giving me a little bit more of that brain, that part of my brain that has to like switch quickly for people. So I'm really enjoying it. It's still new, so we'll see.
I love it. I love it. It's interesting. From the pandemic, I've had a lot of trainer friends who had to pivot, obviously, to Zoom coaching, and it was one-on-one. And some of them taught group classes, and those weren't happening. And that yearning for it, like they really missed it.
Yeah. I actually did. I started the pandemic with Zoom classes group. Like I'd have a screen of people with like wine bottles or books, like anything they could find, because everybody bought all the weights off the internet.
Right. Kettlebell was like $400.
Yeah. Yes. And so I did Zoom classes on and off up until this past December.
Wow.
And then they're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there just like an energetic shift? You're like, I'm exhausted.
Yeah, it was an energetic shift. The size of classes started to taper off a little bit. And I knew that I wanted to shift my business a little bit, and I didn't want to have that set class on the schedule all the time. And it was a hard decision because I felt like I was making the decision for me and not for the people. And that's hard for me. But I want my business to be a little bit more not location independent, because it is, but, I wanted less things on my calendar that I had to change.
Got it.
Because
like more flexibility.
Flexibility. I'm auditioning. If I were to book a job, I would need to like move things around. I don't want to disappoint all these people taking class. So it was just time to kind of say thank you and move on.
Yeah. Amazing. I love it. For the woman who is maybe on the fence, about doing Thyroid Strong, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that, the investment is future. It's like a future investment we have to make right now, right? Like, it's about setting up a foundation that you can rely on for a very, very long time. And something I have discovered with myself over the past 6 months, or not even 6 months, 4 months. And since I was able to start moving pain-free again with Thyroid Strong, is that the connection to our body is so important. And Thyroid Strong won't only get you into training with weights again, specifically with kettlebells, it'll also probably inspire other movement in your life that will bring you joy.
Like power walking.
Like power walking, like hiking, like anything. I had to do a dance combination the other day for an audition.
Wow.
I'm terrible at it, but I was able to do it.
So it's interesting because I have a lot of women who come to Thyroid Strong and they're like, I work out, I walk. And I'm like, well, it's different. And usually I kind of dig a little bit with questions of like, oh, well, after a certain period of walking, does something ache? Or does anything come up, in terms of injuries? And they're like, oh, well, sometimes like my low back aches or my SI joints ache. And I kind of share that, if you build a foundation of strength, maybe you could be walking further. So like that thing you love to do, you just do it more, right? Because you've built that foundation.
Some of my favorite days are when I train and walk. Like it's fun. I'll like go train and then I'll go take a walk to like celebrate it. I also, oh shoot, I just lost my train of thought, but you were saying about, I think it's an interesting like conversation around language in our industry, specifically around working out and training.
Yeah.
People like, what do you do for your workouts? Well, I do this, this versus like weight training. Right.
Yeah.
So, and there's still a lot of fear around it. I get it. People see kettlebells being thrown around in very peculiar ways and they get a little scared, So one thing with Thyroid Strong is I don't think there's a safer way that somebody could teach people how to move kettlebells around than with your program.
I love it. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
one question that I'm just curious about is I've noticed, and maybe it's just like my social media feed, that there's this, a lot of women ask, oh, well, I'm scared, lifting weight, getting bulky. It's already difficult to lose weight with Hashimoto's. And I feel like there's this trend right now of like being strong is embraced. It's celebrated, like the kind of Kate Moss wafy
Yep.
is like not as popular. I'm like, is this just my Instagram feed or is this like across the board?
I think there's a lot more of consistent conversation around women and weight training for sure. I think the don't get too bulky is like just this like annoying, lingering narrative that was in the early 2000s that isn't true. And the science behind what it takes to get bulky, people don't want to like, it's like, they just say, I don't want to get bulky. I'm like, would you understand the science of what it would take to get there? You would be eating like, it's just, they just don't want to look a certain way. But then but then a lot of times I've had a conversation like, well, tell me what you do feel like you want to feel and aesthetically what you're looking for. And then they'll like maybe show you a picture or I don't know, show you something. You're like, well, that person lifts weights. Right.
Yeah.
And so, but no, I agree. I think there's a lot, and I think it's awesome because I think the more familiar weight training can become, the better. I think for all people, but specifically for women, when you tap into that physical strength, it really just does so much good for your like personal power in the world.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
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 There's this really interesting documentary right now on Netflix called Stutz. Have you heard about this?
I haven't.
Stutz. It's the last name of this man who is a therapist to Jonah Hill.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm only bringing this up because, and I'm going to butcher this. So if you're listening and you want to learn more, go look it up. But he talks about your life force, and there's a pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid is where you always have to start after you've, like, if you're having feelings of disconnection, anxiety, whatever these things are. And the first level is always connection to physical self. Come back to your body always. And as trainers, as very specific niche trainers, you're way more niche than I am. If you can give somebody that throughway to that connection, it's such a gift.
It is such a gift.
It's such a gift. There's a lot of people. Do you know how many women and one man have reached out to me and say they've had Hashimoto's? They have it. Yeah, like so many.
Wow.
Like I got diagnosed this long ago. You were in my most recent newsletter. I linked you. So I don't know if people are coming your way, but like so many people, they're like, I've had it for 4 years and this, that, and the other. And my endocrinologist actually told me that there's a huge upswing in autoimmune as a result of the pandemic.
Interesting.
And the stress that it put on people's lives.
Yeah, I could totally see that. Steph, thank you so much for sharing your journey. I mean, it was so fun to have you in the program. It was actually like a little nerve-wracking at times because I was like, oh, she's a trainer and she's legit. And she does kettlebells and she did it, Mark Fisher. She's probably like, what is this 3 reps? But I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. And like, so many times, sometimes I see Thyroid Strong as like the vehicle to get out of the stuck, whatever is making us feel stuck, to just start. It's like I see it as like the ignition sometimes.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, leading lady fitness, _, leading _ lady _ weird. Website is all linked there. And my website has like blogs and recipes. I'm trying to get a little bit more thorough with that kind of stuff, but, I just want to say one more thing to those listening, especially people who are women who have Hashimoto's. The gym can be very overwhelming. And so that's one thing I should have said earlier. To be able to walk in the gym with a plan and not have to pay attention to anybody else in that space but yourself is worth the price of admission. There's just so much pride in that feeling of going in and doing the work and leaving. and feeling like you know what's going on. It's so good. So it's worth every penny for that alone and then some. But yeah, come my way if you have any more questions, people. I will send you to the program always.
Thank you, lady.
Yeah.
And you also have a podcast people should check out.
Oh yes, Leading Lady Fitness podcast on the Broadway Podcast Network.
Awesome. And you interview Broadway.
I interview a
Actors,
lot of
actresses.
Broadway performers, mostly women, but not all, around their journey with body, self, food, all the relationships that are intertwined with all of that. And yeah, we have 2 seasons that are up, and we'll probably dive into season 3 here soon.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on
Oh my God, thank you. It was such an honor to be here. Thank you.